Welcome to the Bucklesberry Lemonade Podcast. I'm your host for the evening, Tim Eubanks. Tonight, we're going to be delivering some high-volume news report style segments, a journey through all 50 states, and we're going to take a look at 50 or more little-known unsolved missing person and homicide cases from the years 1976 through 1986. And then, toward the end of the episode, as an added bonus, another story, the tale of two Irenes, a common name, yet two women with identical names in separate decades and separated by over 1,000 miles, murdered in circumstances so bizarre that their cases have become local legends. Stay tuned, guys. Carla Rebecca Corley. On August 12, 1980, 14-year-old Carla Corley was last seen in her Birmingham, Alabama home right around her bedtime. Later that night, the house doors were found wide open. Furniture was overturned, and her mother was asleep upstairs. But Carla was missing. The sudden and chaotic nature of her vanishing quickly pointed to foul play. Carla has never been seen again. Amy and Scott Fandle. In November 1978 in Sterling, Alaska, 8-year-old Amy and her 13-year-old brother Scott vanished from their home. The strange part, besides their disappearance, when their mother returned, a pot of water was boiling on the stove next to an unopened box of macaroni and cheese. Amy and Scott have never been located and have never been seen again. Arthur Humphrey went unnamed for decades. He was discovered in 1986. His remains were behind a Hub Cafe in Arizona. He was only formally identified in 2025, thanks to advances in forensic genealogy. His killer was never found. His case remains unsolved. On December 2nd, 1976, 16-year-old Cynthia Mabry disappeared from her Arkansas home. Although a serial killer confessed to killing her and two others, Cynthia's body has never been found. William Billy Duncan. In October 1982, the 23-year-old aspiring actor was found murdered in the Hollywood Hills of California. The central bizarre element of the crime is that he was found wearing only one shoe and one sock. The other pair was missing from the scene. Also in California, Nancy Lee Spahn. In October 1980, Nancy was abducted near her home. Although it's widely believed she is the victim of the dating game killer, Rodney Alcala, her murder officially remains unsolved. Local law enforcement, they blame it to complex judicial issues. In October 1980, Gordon Charles Griesgräber vanished from Greeley, Colorado, leaving behind a packed suitcase, and his brand new 1980 Chevy pickup truck was found abandoned at a rest stop in Wyoming, followed by a hoax ransom call that confused the investigators. His case remains open and unsolved. In September 1982, former Waterbury, Connecticut Mayor Raymond Daddario and his wife Gloria were found tied up and brutally stabbed in their home. This remains a bizarre, targeted, and unexplained double homicide. that has never been solved. In September 1986, 23-year-old Jane Pritchard, a master's student conducting botany research in Blackbird Forest State Park in Delaware, was found shot to death. No rhyme, no reason, no killer ever found. Her case remains open. The Flat Tire Murders. This refers to a series of unsolved homicides that took place in Florida between 1975 and 1976. The killer is believed to have deliberately deflated the tires of women's cars, lured them into stopping and accepting his deadly help. The case is still ongoing. In Sarasota, Florida, on October 23, 1982, the body of Lisa Schaffner was discovered in a field located at 2301 North Tuttle Avenue. Lisa's death was the result of a homicide. No leads, no clues. Her case remains open. And the following case comes from Georgia. James Marion Hedigio. In December of 1982, 61-year-old James Hedigio left his home in his son's distinctive blue 1977 Ford Thunderbird to run errands. Unfortunately, neither James nor the car have ever been seen since. Then heading to Hawaii, the Honolulu Strangler. In 1985, 25-year-old military spouse Vicky Gale Priddy was the first of 5 women tied and strangled. The victims were found with their hands bound behind their backs, and the case remains officially unsolved to this day. The following case took place in Idaho in June of 1981. 22-year-old student Kristen Davis. She vanished while cycling. Her dismembered remains were later found in garbage bags, wrapped in pages of the Lewiston Tribune newspaper. Her killer was never caught. This took place in Illinois. In September 1984, an unidentified man was found murdered in rural Illinois. He was wearing a unique, expensive gold bracelet with the initials DJ. But his face had been removed, making immediate identification impossible. He's now known as the Hindenburg John Doe. On October 8, 1976, a farmer in Benton County, Indiana, was driving his combine through his cornfield when he spotted a large cardboard box sitting upright between the corn rows. It was heavy enough that he couldn't move it alone, so he brought it back to the farm with help. Once the box was in the shed, a strange perfume-like odor seeped from the seams. The farmer cut back a corner, saw an empty perfume bottle and a plastic-wrapped shape, and immediately called the sheriff. When deputies opened it fully, they found the body of a woman curled in a fetal position, wrapped tightly in plastic. She wore green pants, a tan and white top. She had green eyes, no makeup, a prior mastectomy, and was estimated to be in her late 50s to early 60s. She'd been dead roughly 7 to 10 days, killed by a single gunshot to the back of the head. The sketch was released, but no family ever came forward. She remains unidentified. Investigators traced the cardboard box to moving companies that serviced Chicago, southern Michigan, and parts of Wisconsin, with Chicago considered the most likely point of origin. The real mystery: how had the box arrived in the middle of a rural cornfield with no tracks, no tire damage, and the cardboard still dry despite recent rainfall? Police concluded it had been placed there only hours before the discovery. Neighbors came forward with something strange. Several had seen or heard a helicopter earlier that morning. Described as a 1976 Bell Jet Ranger, an extremely expensive aircraft at that time, witnesses said it approached from the northeast, hovered over the farm fields, then left toward the northwest. Police believed the box was airdropped, and because it would take at least one pilot and one or more people to push the box out, they were confident multiple individuals were involved in the woman's murder and disposal. In 2019, the woman's body was exhumed for new forensic testing, but no findings have been publicly released. To this day, no one knows who she was, or who killed her, or who flew a helicopter into rural Indiana just to drop a body in a field. She's still known only as the woman in the box of Benton County. The following story comes from Iowa. In 1980, railroad workers discovered a skeleton near Burlington's train yard. The remains? They belonged to a white male, estimated to be between 30 and 50 years old. He'd been deceased for months, but no missing persons matched him at all. He had had high-quality dental work. He wore expensive boots, a healed gunshot wound in his shoulder, and nothing else. No ID, no wallet. No one ever came forward. To this day, he's simply known as the Burlington John Doe. The following comes from Kansas. In December 1986, 39-year-old Antonio Harris was found deceased, the victim of a homicide, on the shoulder of US 69. His white Toyota truck was parked nearby. His case has never been solved. In October 1977, 23-year-old Larry Dale Green left his home in Kentucky after an argument and vanished, along with his 1968 Chevrolet Impala. Larry nor his Impala have ever been seen again. The next case takes us to Louisiana. Stephanie Lee Smith. Stephanie attended a job interview on June 9, 1977, at the LSU Medical Center on Tulane Avenue. She was last seen at 12:30 p.m. Stephanie's 1975 white MGB was found near her apartment complex a day or so later. The car was unusually clean. There were no signs of break-ins in her apartment, and nothing was missing. Stephanie's never been seen or heard from again. August 24th, 1986. Kay Johnson. She was living in a rented home in Monson, Maine with her granddaughter. The granddaughter left for the day, and upon return, found that her grandmother Kay was missing. Critical items of importance were left behind in the residence. Search efforts produced no leads. Kay Johnson has never been located. Kelly Lynn Suffel was a 15-year-old sophomore from Maryland On the evening of Friday, March 15th, 1985, she told her family she was going to spend the night at the home of a close friend who just lived a short distance away. However, things turned strange, with the first strange event occurring sometime after Kelly left home. Around 11:30 p.m., March 15th, a fire was reported at the very friend's home she was scheduled to spend the night with. The fire was significant enough to require a response, but was quickly extinguished. Investigators did determine it was indeed arson. It has never been definitively proven whether Kelly ever made it to this friend's house, or if the fire was set to cover up her disappearance or draw attention away from the real crime. Kelly was reported missing after she failed to return home the next morning. This would have been Saturday, March 16th, 1985, and sometime around 9 a.m., Kelly's body was discovered in a wooded area bordering a construction site, roughly 15 minutes away from her home. She had been brutally stabbed multiple times. Now, the bizarre detail that makes this case stand out is the temporal and geographical proximity of the two incidents. A fire that's ruled an arson occurred at the location where Kelly was supposed to be staying on Friday night. Kelly's body, bearing signs of a violent attack, was discovered miles away the next morning. Investigators have never been able to fully resolve this link. Was the arsonist Kelly's killer? Maybe they were attempting to cover their tracks or possibly divert police. Did Kelly even arrive at the house? Was she abducted before the fire? Or was she already dead when the fire was set? The identity of the person responsible for both the arson and Kelly's murder remains unknown. The case, while cold, does remain active. Lynn Burdick was just 18 years old when she vanished on April 17, 1982, while working alone at the Barefoot Peddler, her cousin's small county store on Florida Mountain in Florida, Massachusetts. The store just set yards from her family home, and Lynn had been working there for 3 years. Around 8 p.m., her cousin called to check on her. Lynn said it had been a slow, rainy night, and around 8:10 p.m., the cousin heard the store's door chime through the phone. Lynn said a customer had just walked in and she'd call her back after closing. Lynn was never heard from again. By 8:40 p.m., a local customer found the store empty, with the door open. Lynn's book and half-finished soda were still on the counter. Her jacket, purse, and $187 from the register. They were all missing. Even though there was extra cash hidden beneath the counter, money only Lynn would know about, that was untouched. Nothing suggested that Lynn left willingly. Investigators immediately suspected an abduction. Some 40 minutes earlier, around 7 p.m., an unidentified man had attempted to kidnap a woman at Williams College, not too far from Lynn's location. The victim managed to escape, and a police officer later reported seeing a vehicle matching the suspect's car headed toward Route 2, the same route the Barefoot Peddler sat on. The suspect was described at around 5'7", possibly had ties to Vermont, and if still living, would be around 70 years old today. Years would go by, and in 1995, Lynn's father received an anonymous letter claiming that Lynn had been abducted and killed by a man in nearby North Adams. Police knew the man named in the letter, but no evidence supported the claim. The writer of the letter never came forward. Lynn was a high honors senior at McCann Vocational Technical High School. She didn't drive, wasn't dating, helped care for her ill mother, and hoped to eventually save enough for college. Lynn's disappearance remains unsolved. The Oakland County Child Killer. That's the name given to an unknown murderer who abducted and killed at least 4 children in Oakland County, Michigan, between 1976 and 1977. The victims, 2 boys and 2 girls, aged 10 to 12. They were held for days, fed, bathed, and kept clean before being murdered and left in public places. Despite massive investigations, suspects, and decades of tips, the identity of this murderer has never been confirmed. This case remains one of Michigan's most haunting, unsolved crimes. The last time anyone saw 19-year-old Cindy Ellis alive was in 1977, after a night out with friends in the mining town of Virginia, Minnesota. When Cindy couldn't find a ride home, she chose to hitchhike. And unfortunately, just hours later, her body was discovered in a remote logging field, abandoned and brutally murdered. She was covered with a pile of brush. And all these years later, her case remains unsolved. In the early morning hours of June 2nd, 1976, 20-year-old Robin Rodriguez, an all-night cashier at the Little General Food Store, located at the corner of 42nd Avenue and 15th Street in Gulfport, Mississippi, disappeared. Her vehicle, a white 1970 Dodge 4-door sedan, was also missing. Later that same morning, her body was found floating in shallow water off of Bells Ferry Road. That evening, her vehicle was found in Long Beach, and it was determined that her vehicle had been there since the morning. Her case has never been solved. Margaret Walsh was a 47-year-old mother who was shot and killed while working as a night manager at a Dairy Queen in Ellensville, Missouri on April 23, 1980. The office had been ransacked and cash had been stolen. The Ellisville Police Department has reopened this case with renewed focus on finding the murdered Margaret. Randy Church was a 23-year-old electrical engineering student at Montana State University. He was murdered at the Pizza Hut in Bozeman, Montana on February 10, 1985. He was closing the restaurant for the night and shot and killed. His body was discovered the following morning. This case remains unsolved, and law enforcement consider it to be Bozeman, Montana's only unsolved homicide in over 40 years. In August 1977, 18-year-old Margaret Margie K. Hoist left her Omaha, Nebraska residence to meet a boy. She was last seen by that boy, who later claimed he dropped her off near her home. After which, Margie has never been seen since. Sandra K. Butler vanished from Sparks, Nevada on June 26, 1978, after leaving home to walk to a nearby shopping center. Considered a runaway at that time, little was done to search for her. She was never seen again. Years later, investigators began to suspect she could have been an early victim of serial killers Gerald and Charlene Gallego, who abducted two teenage girls from the Sparks Fairgrounds almost exactly 1 year after Sandra disappeared. Sandra had planned to ride her bike to the Reno Rodeo at the fairgrounds the day she vanished, and the Gallegos were confirmed to have been in that area. Gerald Gallego died on California's death row in 2002. Charlene, unfortunately, was released from prison in 1997 and now lives under a new identity. Police have never been able to question her about Sandra's case, which remains open and unsolved. Harold Daly, 66 years old, was last seen departing his residence in East Windsor, New Jersey at approximately 5 a.m. the morning of December 7th, 1983. Mr. Daly has never been seen or heard from again. Laura Hernandez went missing from Clovis, New Mexico in December 1980. There's little else really known about Laura. There has been some speculation she may be the Ventura County Jane Doe, found in California that same year, 1980. But the timing and some details have created inconsistencies in this theory. As of today, Laura Hernandez remains missing, and her case remains open. The disappearance of Robert Drock. This happened on June 14, 1980 in Cortland, New York. Robert Drock was a 23-year-old man who was last seen leaving a family gathering at a relative's house on East Main Street in Cortland, New York around 2:30 a.m. He was reportedly intoxicated when he left and intended to walk a short distance to the home of a friend or possibly another relative who he was staying with at the time. But Bob never arrived. The mystery deepened when some of his personal belongings were discovered scattered around the immediate vicinity days later. His wallet, keys, and jacket were found in a field near the relative's house he had just left. Finding his essentials abandoned suggested a struggle or maybe an interrupted trip home. But another clue that's hard to explain was the discovery of his shoes and socks inside a small, unlocked storage shed on the same property. A storage shed that Bob really had no need to enter. Now, the facts surrounding the items raise numerous questions that have never been answered. Why was his shoes removed? If he was walking home while intoxicated, why would he stop to take his shoes and socks off and then place them inside a storage shed? Why were the belongings separated? His jacket and wallet were in an open field, while his shoes were carefully placed inside a shed. This separation defies logic, even intoxicated logic, and suggests different actions occurred at different times, or possibly another party was involved in staging this scene. Despite exhaustive searches, no further trace of Bob Drock was ever found, leading investigators to suspect he was indeed the victim of foul play shortly after leaving that gathering. Bob Drock was officially declared deceased in 1987, but the case remains an active cold case with the Cortland Police Department, still baffled by the mystery of the shed and those shoes. On October 20th, 1980, 19-year-old Pamela Murray was found murdered in Raleigh, North Carolina. Investigators believe her case is strongly connected to the 1979 murder of Beverly Sherman, suggesting a serial killer may have been active in that area. Neither Beverly's or Pamela's case have ever been solved. So let's put aside our state-by-state countdown for one special, unsettling episode. This is the story of coincidence, secrecy, and fury. It's the tale of two Irenes. You have to ask yourself, what are the statistical odds? The name is common, Irene Wilson. Yet, in two separate decades, separated by over 1,000 miles, two women bearing the exact same name were murdered in circumstances so bizarre and unsolved, their cases became local legends. These cases are linked not by a serial killer, but by their endings. They're defined by the profound personal secrets they hold. Secrets that have kept justice out of reach for well over 40 years. Our first Irene Wilson is a 52-year-old worker at Fetty's store, murdered in her rural home in Broomstick, West Virginia. On January 5th, 1963, Irene came home from work and was preparing a late supper. Sometime around 9:30 p.m., neighborhood girls found her body after her husband Delford called. He was worried she wasn't answering the phone. The scene defied logic. Police found no signs of a struggle, and cash was left on the dining room table, ruling out robbery. But the sheer brutality was almost beyond comprehension. Irene had been stabbed approximately 52 times. One stab wound for every year of her life. Her hair and a duster, which she wore, were partially burned. This came across as personal, extreme, and furious. The theories ran wild in Calhoun County. There was the husband, Delford, and he was known to have a terrible temper. His convenient alibi and death by heart attack 5 months later left some suspicion unresolved. And then there were the rumors about a local man with schizophrenia who had been known to quote scripture before committing strange acts. The truth remains buried, locked away in the community's silence and the cold file cabinets of the West Virginia State Police. The simple fact that money was left on the table, but the attack was so visceral, that could only mean the motive was intensely private. A secret Irene Wilson carried to her grave. Some 15 years later, in the suburban quiet of Merriam, Kansas, an entirely different mystery began. This is the case of the second Irene Wilson, aged 51, found murdered in her home in October 1978. Like the first Irene, she too was stabbed to death. And just like the first Irene, there was no signs of forced entry. This Irene, she knew her killer, but no one knew the life she was living. Because when detectives searched the home, they made a shocking discovery. A false wall concealed a small, secret room behind a bookcase. This was Irene's rendezvous point, and it contained the key to her death. Inside the little room of secrets, there were coded letters, a bag of hidden cash, and most frustratingly, photographs of multiple unidentified men. The murder weapon was absent, but the evidence of Irene's secret life, it was everywhere. The investigation stalled, not for lack of suspects, but for lack of their identities. The killer was almost certainly one of the men in those photos, or somehow connected to those coded messages. Irene Wilson's life was so secret, so complete, that her murderer remained an anonymous part of that hidden world, completely inaccessible to the police. The tale of two Irenes, two seemingly ordinary women, two very brutal ends. In West Virginia, the secret was carried in the brutality of 52 stab wounds, a fury so intensely personal it resisted answers. In Kansas, the secret was physically concealed behind a bookcase in a secret room, defying identification and logic. Both names belong to women whose final tragic chapters are defined by extraordinary layers of complexity. If you have any information about the 1963 murder of Irene Wilson in West Virginia, or the 1978 murder of Irene Wilson in Kansas, please contact the proper authorities.
We now join our regularly scheduled programming already in progress.
"15-year-old Barbara Cotton left a Williston diner in North Dakota on April 9, 1981. Walking toward Recreation Park under the dim street lights, she never made it home. Her glasses, money, and belongings were still in her room as if she planned to return. Police called her a runaway, but her family knew better. Rumors arose, suspects faded, and the years have gone by with no answers. Barbara Cotton is still missing. Theodore Franks was last seen in Middleton, Ohio. Some reports say May 31st, 1986, and some say sometime around Labor Day. On the day he vanished, according to family and other reports, Teddy had had a fight with his then wife. He went to his sister's apartment and asked for a ride to a gas station around Roosevelt Boulevard and Jackson Lane. When they arrived, he jumped out of the car and ran off before the car was even in park. Witnesses reported seeing two people chasing him down the road just after he ran. He left behind his wallet, car, and other personal belongings. His sister described his behavior that day as bizarre and believes he was afraid of something or someone. He had 2 young daughters. His Social Security number has never been used, and his driver's license has never been renewed. In recent years, investigators have collected DNA from family members and submitted it to labs, trying to match Teddy's profile with unidentified persons. Strangely enough, in 2021, his family received a photo allegedly showing 3 men bound and tied in a pond, with one of the men looking eerily like Teddy. There's another man present, and it looks like he may be holding a shotgun. The family shared the image with the detectives. Now, some internet sleuths, well, they think this photo is from a movie. Others fear it's evidence of foul play. Teddy's family is undecided. Teddy Franks remains missing to this day. On December 10th, 1981, 32-year-old Ronald Shelley vanished from a house in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Investigators found his boots, his glasses, and his vehicle. They also found blood inside the house. The Tulsa Police Department believes Ronald was murdered at that house, but his body has never been found and no suspects have ever been charged. Marion Vanetta Nagel McWhorter, born January 7, 1953, vanished after hitchhiking through Oregon in late October 1974. She was traveling from California with plans to reach Alaska. She called her nearby aunt from a payphone on October 26th, stating that a man in a white pickup truck had offered her a ride. She was never heard from again. Then on July 24, 1976, a moss gatherer found her remains off Highway 20 near Sweet Home, Oregon. And despite early efforts, she remained unidentified for nearly 50 years, until genetic genealogy confirmed her identity in September 2025. Police definitely consider foul play most likely at this point. Marion's case is one of several linked to the ghosts of Highway 20, a series of disappearances and murders in Lynn County during the 1970s and the 1980s. Many victims are believed to be connected to roadside mechanic John Arthur Aykroyd. He was convicted in 2013 for the murder of his stepdaughter, and he's long been suspected in multiple Highway 20 cases. Only one victim from the cluster, a woman found in 1978, remains unidentified. Cherry Mahan disappeared at the age of 8 on February 22, 1985. She'd gotten off her school bus near her home in rural Butler County, Pennsylvania. Her case remains an unsolved mystery. The recent investigative efforts and tips have brought it back to the spotlight. Cherry was last seen at approximately 4:10 p.m. on that fateful February day, roughly 500 feet from her home. She was walking home from the bus stop after being dropped off with other children. Her mother and stepfather were home and expected her to arrive shortly. She never made it to the house. One key clue, a distinctive blue or green van with a mural of a mountain and a skier on the side, were reportedly seen in the area at the time of Cherry's disappearance. That van has never been identified or located. Cherry still remains missing to this day. Donald Joseph Connell was last seen in Newport, Rhode Island on December the 2nd, 1986. He had left his parents' house to walk to his sister's house, who was one block over. Donald has never been seen again. In September 1978, 19-year-old Evelyn Weston was found shot to death off a rural dirt road in Richland County, South Carolina. No weapon, no suspects, and no clear motive. For decades, her case sat cold. Then, in 2018, America's most prolific serial killer, Samuel Little, began confessing to murders all across the country. Among them was a young woman claimed to have killed in South Carolina sometime in the late 70s. Investigators noticed striking similarities. The location he described, the way the victim was found, and small details only someone at the scene of the crime would have known. But when the detective showed Little a photo of Evelyn Weston, he said she wasn't the woman he remembered, raising doubts and leaving the case in a gray area between confession and coincidence. Today, Evelyn's murder remains officially unsolved, and investigators say they still haven't ruled Samuel Little in or out. Staying in South Carolina in October 1983, Joe Luther Woods, just 34 years old, checked into the Quality Inn Motel in Columbia, South Carolina. But he never left by his own power. His body was later found in the motel parking lot. He'd been shot to death beside his car. Witnesses say he reportedly had been acting strange and nervous, but no weapon or clear motive was ever identified. Despite a full homicide investigation, the case went cold. Woods wasn't known to have enemies. There was nothing stolen. It suggested a targeted execution rather than a random crime. Decades later, his murder remains unsolved. Authorities still list his case among their active cold case files, hoping one day they'll finally bring justice to a man whose life vanished so suddenly and deadly in the night. Donna Larrabee was living in Rapid City, South Dakota with her mother. She left to take a bus to California to visit her father. It was in November of 1976. Donna has never been seen or heard from again. In September of 1981, Pauline Polly Melton, age 58, went hiking with two friends on the Deep Creek Trail in the Great Smoky Mountains. Polly knew this trail. It was easy, familiar, and well-traveled. Nothing about this hike was dangerous. But on that afternoon, it became the last place that anyone saw her. Halfway through the hike, Polly suddenly began walking faster. She rounded a bend in the path, just a few steps ahead of her friends. And when they reached the same spot moments later, Polly was gone. No footprints veering off the trail, no broken brush, no noise, nothing. Search teams, helicopters, dogs. It was one of the largest deployments in the Smokies' history. They found zero trace of her. It was as if the forest swallowed her whole. But the strangest twist, that came years later. A check bearing Polly's signature was reportedly cashed in Alabama, hundreds of miles from where she vanished. Her husband insisted Polly wasn't capable of just simply walking away, although the signature looked very similar to Polly's. She had left behind her purse, her medication, everything she relied on. So what happened on that trail? Did Polly stage her own disappearance? Was she taken? Did someone else sign that check? To this day, Pauline Polly Melton walked around a bend and stepped straight into legend. Deborah Jackson was found strangled near an interstate in Texas in 1979. She was known for decades only as the Orange Socks victim. While identified in 2019, her homicide remains officially unsolved, as the confession made by serial killer Henry Lee Lucas was proven to be false. Ruby Ackers, age 75, vanished from the Sherman Nursing Center in Sherman, Texas in January 1986. She was staying there temporarily while recovering from a dislocated shoulder, and she had been a resident there for about 2 months. On the day Miss Ruby disappeared, she went to the nurse's station around 3 p.m. to ask that stitches in her finger be removed. The nurse told her to wait a moment, and when she returned roughly 10 minutes later, Ruby was gone. Ruby's eyeglasses, dentures, and the sweater she always wore were still in her room. These were items she would never leave behind. A massive search around the facility turned up nothing. Ruby's family said that although she had occasional confusion, she was mentally capable, independent, and known in the community after running the laundromat for many, many years. After she vanished, the family received anonymous calls claiming Ruby had died inside the nursing home after being accidentally overdosed with Thorazine, and that her body had been hidden. These claims, they were never proven, and the caller was never identified. Ruby Ackers has never been found, and her disappearance remains unsolved. Vicki Annette Smock was last seen in Salt Lake City, Utah on January 1st, 1985. Her father dropped her off at a Greyhound station. She was with an unidentified man and planned to take a bus to Wendover, Nevada, to start a new job as a cocktail waitress at the Red Garner Hotel and Casino. She never arrived, and there's no evidence that she ever boarded the bus. Vicki had just $50 with her, but she always stayed in close contact with her family and regularly visited her 2 daughters. Loved ones said it was unlike her to disappear voluntarily, and at that time she was estranged from her second husband, who was reportedly jealous and violent. He died years later and was never interviewed by investigators. Vicki's first husband described her as very trusting. Vicki's never been found. Foul play is suspected. Craig Eugene Alexander was last seen in Burlington, Vermont on January 28, 1985. Earlier that day, he'd packed up at his parents' home in Berlin, New Hampshire, and drove back to college. He did arrive safely. Craig parked his green Mazda in front of the Lane Press building on St. Paul Street, and then walked a few doors down to visit a friend. He left that friend's home at 11 p.m. and was never seen again. 4 days later, Craig's Mazda was found buried under snow, exactly where he'd left it. Investigators believe he was taken against his will. He's never been found. Cynthia Joan Gastill, 18 years old, was last seen on April 3, 1980. She had left her home in Tacoma Park, Maryland, heading to 2 separate job interviews, and she only arrived at one. She was reported after failing to return home, and her skeletal remains were discovered almost 2 years later, on February the 11th, 1982, by a hiker on Bull Run Mountain in Prince William County, Virginia, approximately 45 miles from her home. At the time, forensic methods were insufficient to identify the body, so Cindy was classified as a Jane Doe. Further examination determined the cause of death to be stabbing, making the case an unsolved homicide. The case was resolved 3 decades later. In 2011, DNA samples from Cindy's family were collected for a national database in connection with an unrelated case elsewhere. The DNA profile was successfully matched, to the Jane Doe remains, and in 2012, Cindy got her name back. However, the identification closed the missing person file, but then the case became an active homicide investigation. Investigators believe Cindy, who could not drive, was transported to the remote Virginia location by an unidentified individual, either before or after her death. That killer has never been identified. In October 1979, 16-year-old Andrea Jean Bailey was last seen walking home from a party in Spanaway Pierce County, Washington. She was approximately 3 miles from her grandmother's house. Andrea vanished completely on that short expected route and has never been found or heard from again. In June 1978, 24-year-old Sheila Gail Wares Pierce vanished from Point Pleasant, West Virginia, and she's never been heard from again. Now, that unsettling location happens to be the town famously associated with the Mothman legend, which adds a layer of local dread to a classic unsolved small-town mystery. Another layer to Sheila's mystery: the serial killer has confessed to have murdered Sheila, but his statement, it's never been verified. She's still classified as a missing person. The Vernon County Jane Doe. She was discovered May 4th, 1984. A middle-aged woman found on a rural gravel road near Westby, Wisconsin. Her face was badly damaged, and in a particularly eerie detail, her hands had been removed, most likely to prevent fingerprint ID. Despite heavy investigation and reconstructions, the Vernon County Jane Doe remains unidentified, and her killer unknown. David Vernon Lovely was just 19 years old when he disappeared August 5th, 1985. David was traveling with his family, his mother and sister, who were driving a large moving truck as they relocated from California back to Massachusetts. David rode his own burgundy 1978 Yamaha 1100 motorcycle. The family had a system, stopping every 30 miles just to check in. And at a stop in Evanston, Wyoming, David decided to ride ahead, telling his family he would meet them a little further east. Later that day, David called his aunt on the East Coast from the Bingo truck stop in Fort Bridger, Wyoming from a payphone. He reported that his motorcycle had broken down. He pushed it to the truck stop. Now, during the call, David mentioned meeting a rough-looking man who rode his own motorcycle. David admitted to his aunt that he was afraid of the man, but noted this man had helped him fix his motorcycle, and now his bike was running better than ever, and he guessed this man was really okay. Now, at this point, David was never heard from again after that phone call. 9 days later, his motorcycle was found by campers in a highly isolated area off a dirt road off South Baxter Road near the Sweetwater County Airport in Rock Springs, Wyoming. The motorcycle was found to be in perfect running condition with half a tank of gas. The keys were still in the ignition. David's helmet and backpack were reportedly propped up nearby. It strongly suggested to authorities that David was intercepted or left the area on foot under unexpected circumstances. An extensive search of the vast, rugged area around the discovery site failed to turn up any sign of David. David Lovely has never been seen or heard from again.
Well, Timmy, that's a wrap.
Well, thank you, my dear.
And there you have it, a trip through all 50 states with over 50 unsolved cases. While we hope you found this episode compelling, please remember, these are real people with families and loved ones who still wonder just what happened. This podcast is one way to keep their voices and their stories alive in the hopes that answers will come someday. So please keep them in your prayers. If you enjoyed this episode and want to help us continue this work, please give us a like and maybe a comment, even if it's nothing more than telling us where you're listening from. We would sincerely appreciate it. Until next time, stay safe, and we hope to see you soon. This is Lisa Eubanks, and on behalf of Tim, good night and God bless.